In here we've got one of the most hyped, lower cost integrated bracelet watches that I've seen in recent years. That is the Citizen Tsuyosa. This is a watch I have never looked at, so let's change that. So I bought this one with my own money on Amazon, as you can see. Boom. Now, Citizen has never been my favorite in terms of designs, but I have to say I do think the Tsuyosa from the stock images looks pretty decent. So, fairly standard Citizen packaging. I've seen that before. And here we go. I went with one of the colours that I thought was the most distinctive and also one of the most popular. Not often you find a yellow coloured watch that is among the best sellers, but it seems to be a theme with the Citizen Tsuyosa. Let's get some of the excess off here. Now, straight out of the box, what do I think? Well, this is supposed to be a 40mm watch. It's definitely smaller than the 40mm Tissot PRX, no doubt. I think some of it might be because it narrows significantly towards the lugs, so the only comparable part of the watch is the very center. But it certainly looks much more palatable for me, at least. And the dial is actually really, really nice with this one. Now, the overall design, let's be honest here, they have at least to some degree taken inspiration from some of the Rolex Oyster Perpetual models. Very similar handset, incredibly similar marker array, but it definitely has its differences, and overall this is a pretty good looking watch. Now, the dial itself here, this yellowy version, is actually tinted much more towards orange in the flesh. You can't quite tell on my camera, which is normally quite accurate, but yeah, color wise I'd say this is at least a third of the way to orange, and as a result it looks great and looks more versatile than expected. I think there's a reason why this one's so popular. One thing I definitely like is the absence of clutter on the dial. You've just got two words, which is not something you find much on lower cost watches. They like to pack it with claims normally. The only thing is maybe the automatic is a little bit low, really. I mean, it sits very, very low there. My main concern with the Tsuyosa was, is this watch going to be too thick to realistically wear? Lots of the images and videos I've seen make it look pretty stubby. I don't think it's quite as stubby as anticipated in person. Something else too is that this watch is definitely better conforming than the bigger 40mm PRX. Now you'll see here you can pretty much taper the bracelet immediately and bend it immediately. And that's even with this end link here. Whereas the PRX, it's got like a second link and then you can only bend it down about here. So I'll be interested to check out the measurements of this in a second. First impressions of the bracelet. The bracelet's reasonable. I mean, it's all solid links. It's definitely not as good quality as the likes of the PRX bracelet, but you can adjust this one, which is great. So you might actually find it more comfortable. And it does match the theme of the watch pretty well. Movement in here. What have we got inside? Dear oh dear, we've got the Miyota 8210. If you followed any of my stuff, you'll know I'm not the biggest fan of the Miyota 8000 series for a variety of reasons. Primarily of which is the noise. Let's see how audible this one is. Yeah, it's definitely got the same audible whirring noise, which is frustrating. But the watch is also reasonably priced compared to a lot of the integrated bracelet offerings. Overall, I'd say I'm pretty impressed. I think this is one of the better Citizens I've looked at in terms of style. Let's get it measured up. And wow, that crown really is almost perfectly recessed in there. It's almost perfectly symmetrical, but it is still easy to access, which is nice. So yeah, overall first impressions are pretty good with this watch. So 40.1mm wide is actually wider than the 40mm PRX, which was actually 39.9, despite looking smaller. The effective lug to lug is 49.2, which is shorter. Oh, and the thickness without the Cyclops is about 11.9, so thickness isn't as bad as maybe I thought. I'll affiliate link this watch in the video description, by the way, if you want to take a look at it for yourself. It does come in a wide variety of other colours, of course. I'd say this is probably going to be my favourite, and there's a reason I chose it. It definitely wears fairly accurately. It does feel like a 40mm watch, which means it's probably a little bit too big for me. My wrist is 6¼ inches for reference, but it's much more compact than the 40mm PRX, which had a much longer lug to lug. And the thickness isn't a huge problem. It's not the thinnest watch, as you can see, but I don't think it's as bulbous as it looks from some of the stuff I've seen online. Just because it's got some pretty prominent looking lume, I'm going to do a low light test quickly as well. Let's have a see. So, lume's reasonable. Far from the brightest you can get for the money. Does seem to die relatively quick too, but I'm not in a perfect environment here. This is just a first impressions test. So, Citizen Tsuyosa, would I prefer it if it were a tiny bit more original when it comes to the dial? Probably, but do I think this is a good quality watch from first impressions? I'd say so. I think this is actually worth checking out. For under £300 most of the time, this is a similar cost to the Quartz PRX, and this is a much better watch than that. Feels a great deal more substantial. Case finishing looks about the same on the surface. Here's a closer look at the watch. Just held in my hands. Cyclops is aligned properly if I tilt that square on. Got a fairly decent sunburst, really. Probably the best looking yellow watch I've seen.